In today's video, we'll discuss how to do a proper squat, proper meaning effective in terms of strengthening, whilst not creating any hazard in other regions of your body. Welcome, I'm Olivier Girard, ergonomist, posture therapist, author of the Posture Manual, and creator of 3 online posture programs. To be didactic, we will really dive into biomechanics to understand why we do what we do. We will take the body starting in the foundations and moving upwards like you would build your house. So let's start in the feet. When you want to do something which is strenuous, in this case, create strain for a strengthening exercise, you need to have strong foundations. So let's discuss what are strong foundations. Have your feet parallel with respect to each other and shift your weight forward. You see, the reaction of your toes is to do like this, like the eagle. It is to cramp. Now, if your weight is too far back, your toes will raise from the ground. So let's look for the in-between. I start too far back and I move forward until just the limit before the eagle. And there, everything happens like my weight would be concentrated here under the arch of the foot. In other words, you can imagine that you have a big root that starts here and that takes you deep into the ground. This root has to always be there. It is your anchor. Now, why do we make sure that the feet are parallel? Well, simply because 2 things. Number 1, if your feet are like this, you will feel that your pelvis wants to shift forward. That's because of the external rotation of the femur bones, which project the pelvis forward due to the pressure of the head of the femur. The other reason why we want that is if you look here, deep into your buttocks at the muscle that contracts when you bring your toes outwards, well, you will feel the contraction of the piriformis. And when the piriformis muscle is contracted, there's constant pressure on the sciatic nerve. So we want the feet to be parallel, we want the weight to be under the arch of the feet, and to load the meniscus symmetrically, we want as much as possible that your feet are at the same width as your hips. And therefore, we make sure that the 2 heads of the femurs roll in a symmetric manner on the tibial plateau. So this is the right position for your feet. Now let's move next and try and understand the link between the knees, the hips, and the lower back. The thing that we want to avoid is that your back hollows, because this increases the pressure on the intervertebral joint, but we also want to avoid that it goes round, that it slouches, because this will increase the pressure on the discs. Hence, we first need to do some kind of a standardization exercise, which is look for the vertebra that pops out first when you slouch. It's probably just above your belt, and you can find it by doing this small internal rotation of your pelvis, like a round back. Now, if like most people, you don't know how to do that standing, which is a bit of a problem if you want to do some fitness, but let's look for the same thing when you sit. You take your chair, any chair doesn't matter, and you slouch. You see what I mean with slouch is you really rotate the pelvis and you look for the vertebra that comes out first. Here it is for me. Careful, when I say slouch, I really mean that this is not slouching. This is called slumping. Slumping is from the upper body, slouching is from the lower body. So here we're looking at the vertebra that comes out first when you slouch. So now we have our body awareness on the arch of the feet where the root starts, and we have the hand on that vertebra that pops out first. And let's do the first type of squat and see the limit of it. You see, you keep your upper body, call it vertical for now, I don't like the word, but call it vertical. And you see that you go lower, 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 and here more or less you don't manage to be in balance under your feet anymore. My toes are starting to get lifted from the ground. Why? Because if you look at my weight, compared to that point here, most of my weight is backwards. So if I want to go lower, I will need to bring something forward. The mistake that most people do is that they hollow their back so that their butt shifts backwards and their upper body shifts forward. This kills your lower back. So what should we do instead? Well, we should instead, if we don't want to mess up the back, put the whole upper body forward, and this will give you more space to go down with your weight. You see? But here, the next problem that I encounter is the hip flexion angle. If I go lower than this, which is more or less 90 degrees, well, the hip flexion angle is too small. Yeah, here there's pressure in my hip joint, and check, I feel that the vertebra starts to come out because the brains are trying to protect this area. So if we summarize this knee, hip, lower back thing, we can do hollow back, flat back. We need to bring some weight forward without shifting our balance. And here we can move down until the hip angle is more or less 90 degrees. Where is your line of sight? It is 90 degrees from your spine, i.e. 1 meter 50 or 2 meters forward. If I look horizontally in front of me, again, my back hollows and I'm killing my vertebra. So you see, this is a proper squat. Yeah? It goes like this. Nothing happens in your lower back, and you make sure that your weight is properly balanced. What you see, which is very interesting and important in terms of body balance, is that something goes forward, my lower legs, something goes back, my upper legs, something goes forward, the torso. So you have elements that go in one direction, elements that go in the other direction, and thereby you stay in balance. You see that I've not mentioned this idea that the kneecap should not go beyond your toes. Why? Because this is biomechanically not grounded. You know, what's grounded is the idea of the balance front back, but the position of the knees with respect to the toes has nothing to do with anything. You know, otherwise, depending on the size of your foot, that means that you would be in a position or the other. That if you have big feet, you have your knee more forward than you have short feet. That's quite strange. You know, so no. It's true that I observe that more or less there's this vertical line between the kneecap and the toes, but that's just a kind of mnemotechnic way to avoid the discussion on weight balance. What matters is that your weight is under the arch of your feet, and what matters is that your back is flat, and what matters is that your neck is not extended, i.e. that your line of sight is at 90 degrees from your spine. And by doing so very properly, therefore very slowly, because power is nothing without control, there you're doing proper squat. Last point, what do I do with my hands? Nothing. Nothing. There's no point to have your hands here because this is a source of strain in the neck and shoulder area. And I don't need to strain my neck and shoulder area to strengthen my thighs or legs or butt, you know? Especially not when I'm an office worker who already has a lot of neck and shoulder strain due to my daily habits and ergonomics.